Sarah Mackenzie carefully swept the gray hair from around the elderly man's shoulders, her movements precise and gentle. Mr. Peterson had been coming to her small salon in downtown Portland for 15 years, and she knew exactly how he liked his trim, short on the sides, just enough length on top to maintain his dignity. "There you go, Mr. Peterson," she said, brushing off his collar. "Sharp as always." The 78-year-old veteran smiled at his reflection. "You're a miracle worker, Sarah. My late wife always said you had magic hands." "Just practice and patience," she replied, removing the cape. "Same time next month?" "Wouldn't miss it." "How much do I owe you?" 25, as always." Peterson reached for his wallet, but Sarah gently stopped him. "You know what? It's on the house today. Thank you for your service, Mr. Peterson." The old man's eyes moistened slightly. "Sarah, you don't have to." "I want to. You've given enough to this country." After Peterson left, Sarah began cleaning her station. The small salon, Sarah's Touch, had been her pride and joy for 8 years. Nothing fancy, just 4 chairs, good lighting, and the kind of atmosphere where people felt comfortable sharing their stories while getting their hair done. She was wiping down the mirrors when the door chimed. 5 young men in their early 20s walked in, wearing matching green uniforms with Murphy's Barbershop embroidered on the shirts. They looked around with the kind of smug confidence that made Sarah's jaw tighten. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" she asked politely. The tallest one, a blonde kid with a face that screamed, "Peaked in high school," stepped forward. "Yeah, we're from Murphy's down the street. Heard you might be looking for work." Sarah set down her cloth. "Excuse me?" "Well," the kid continued with a grin that didn't reach his eyes, "word is you're having trouble keeping this place afloat. Murphy's is expanding, and we might have an opening for someone with your experience." The way he said, "your experience," made it clear he'd never seen Sarah work. She'd been cutting hair since she was 16, had trained under some of the best stylists in Chicago before moving to Portland. "I appreciate the offer," she replied evenly, "but I'm not interested." Another one of them, a stocky redhead with arms covered in amateur tattoos, laughed. "Come on, sweetheart. What did you do before this? Nails?" The others chuckled. Sarah felt the familiar burn of anger rising in her chest, but kept her voice steady. "Actually, I was in Syria for 3 years. Just got back." The laughter died. The blonde kid's smirk wavered slightly. "Syria? Like, the country?" "That's the one." "Doing what?" the redhead asked, skepticism dripping from his voice. Sarah picked up her cleaning cloth again, focusing on a spot that didn't need cleaning. "Cutting hair." More snickers from the group. A thin brunette with a patchy beard spoke up. "Right. You were cutting hair in a war zone." "Sure thing, lady." "Actually," Sarah said quietly, "I was cutting hair on Forward Operating Base Kandahar for 18 months, then Camp Arifjan in Kuwait for 6 months, and finally 2 years at a contractor base outside Damascus. But you're right, it was mostly just nails." The sarcasm in her voice was subtle but unmistakable. The 5 young men exchanged glances, clearly unsure whether she was serious. "Look," the blonde one said, apparently deciding to push forward, "Murphy's is the premier barbershop in this neighborhood. We do real work. Military cuts, classic styles. Not whatever this is." He gestured dismissively around her salon. Sarah nodded slowly. "I see. And how long have you boys been cutting hair?" "I've been at Murphy's for 2 years," the redhead said proudly. 18 months, said another. 6 months, admitted the youngest-looking one. "And you?" Sarah looked at the apparent leader. 3 years. Started right out of barber school." "Barber school," Sarah repeated. "How long was the program?" 9 months." 9 months. She nodded thoughtfully. "That's impressive. In Syria, I had about 15 minutes to learn how to cut hair with a knife when our regular equipment got blown up in a mortar attack. Took me 3 tries to figure out how to give a decent fade with nothing but a combat blade and a broken mirror." The room went quiet. The cocky grins were fading fast. You know what the hardest part was? Sarah continued, her voice still conversational. Keeping your hands steady when the rockets are coming in. Funny how a little thing like potential death makes it challenging to maintain clean lines. She walked over to her chair and ran her hand along the leather armrest. This chair? It's the same model we had at Kandahar. Salvaged it from a bombed-out barbershop in Damascus. The owner didn't need it anymore. IED took out his whole family. But the chair survived. Amazing what can endure when everything else falls apart. The 5 young men were now looking distinctly uncomfortable. The leader cleared his throat. Look, we didn't mean to… Oh, you didn't mean to what? Sarah's voice carried just a hint of steel now. Didn't mean to come into my shop and assume I was some suburban princess playing dress-up? Didn't mean to suggest that whatever I've been doing couldn't possibly measure up to your 9 months of barber school? She moved to her tool station and picked up a straight razor, testing the edge with practiced ease. You know what I learned in Syria? I learned that every single person who sits in your chair is fighting a battle you know nothing about. I cut hair for soldiers who hadn't seen their families in 18 months. I cut hair for contractors who were counting down days until they could go home to their kids. I cut hair for interpreters who knew they'd probably be dead within a year for helping Americans. The razor gleamed in the afternoon light streaming through her windows. I cut hair for boys your age who'd seen things that would give you nightmares for the rest of your lives. And you know what every single one of them wanted? They wanted to feel human again. They wanted to look in the mirror and see someone worth saving. She set the razor down gently. That's what I do here. That's what I've always done. I don't just cut hair. I remind people that they matter. That they're worth the time and care it takes to do the job right. The blonde kid was shifting nervously from foot to foot. We were just trying to offer you a job. No, Sarah said firmly. You were trying to put me in my place. You saw a woman running a small business and assumed she must be desperate for rescue. Well, let me tell you something about rescue, boys. I've seen what it really looks like. It's not 5 cocky kids with fresh haircuts offering charity. It's soldiers pulling their wounded buddies out of burning vehicles. It's medics working on the wounded while mortars are exploding around them. It's people risking everything for strangers because it's the right thing to do. She walked back to her cleaning, dismissing them with her body language. Now, unless you need haircuts, and I charge $50 for a cut and trim, I suggest you head back to Murphy's. I'm sure he's wondering where his employees disappeared to during business hours. $50? The redhead sputtered. That's highway robbery. Sarah looked up with a smile that could have frozen hell. Supply and demand, sweetheart. I'm the only barber in this neighborhood who knows how to cut hair under rocket fire. Premium service commands premium prices. The group began shuffling toward the door. The leader paused at the threshold. Look, we didn't know about your background. Maybe we came across wrong. Maybe you did, Sarah agreed. But here's the thing about maybe. It doesn't change what happened. You walked in here with assumptions and disrespect. The only difference now is that you're embarrassed about it. After they left, Sarah finished cleaning her station in silence. The encounter had stirred up memories she usually kept locked away. The constant stress of working in a war zone, the friends she'd lost, the way it felt to come home to a country that didn't quite know what to do with women like her. The door chimed again, and Sarah looked up to see a familiar face. Detective Ray Martinez had been coming to her shop for 6 months, ever since his regular barber retired. Afternoon, Sarah. Got time for a trim? Always. Have a seat. Martinez settled into the chair, and Sarah began her work. He was one of the few customers who knew about her time overseas. Not because she'd told him, but because he'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan and recognized something in her eyes. Heard you had some visitors earlier, he said casually. News travels fast. Small neighborhood. Murphy's boys were telling everyone at the coffee shop how they tried to recruit some desperate woman who turned out to be a crazy veteran with PTSD. Sarah's hands paused for just a moment before continuing with the cut. Is that what they said? Among other things, figured you might want to know what story they're spreading. Let me guess. I threatened them with a razor and told war stories to make myself seem tough. Something like that. Though between you and me, their version keeps changing every time they tell it. Sarah worked in silence for a moment, processing the information. This was how it always went. Challenge someone's assumptions, and suddenly, you're the unstable one. Stand up for yourself, and you're the problem. Ray, she said finally, can I ask you something? Shoot. Do you ever get tired of people thanking you for your service? Martinez considered the question. Sometimes. Depends on whether they mean it or they're just saying words. What about when they say it and then treat you like you're broken? He nodded in understanding. You mean the thank you for your service, but please don't make me think too hard about what that actually means crowd? Exactly. Sarah stepped back to check her work. They want the feel-good story about supporting the troops, but they don't want to deal with the reality of what we actually did over there. Or the reality that some of us came back different. Or that some of us were never broken to begin with. Martinez met her eyes in the mirror. You know what the real problem is? They can't figure out how to categorize us. Are we heroes or victims? Warriors or casualties? They need us to be one thing, and when we turn out to be complex human beings, it confuses them. Sarah resumed cutting, finding comfort in the familiar rhythm. I wasn't a hero over there, Ray. I was just a woman with a pair of scissors trying to help people feel a little more human in an inhuman situation. And now? Now I'm a woman with a pair of scissors trying to help people feel a little more human in a different kind of inhuman. Situation. Sounds heroic to me. Sounds ordinary to me. The problem is that ordinary isn't dramatic enough for most people. They want either victim or superhero. They can't handle the idea that someone might just be competent and tired. Martinez chuckled. Competent and tired. That should be on a t-shirt. The door chimed again, and Sarah looked up to see Mrs. Chen, one of her regular customers. The elderly Chinese woman had been coming to the shop for 3 years, always asking for Sarah specifically. Mrs. Chen, you're early today. I heard some young men were bothering you, the older woman said, settling into the waiting area. Thought I should come show support. That's very kind, but it's not necessary. It is necessary. In my country, we learned that bad men become brave when good people do nothing. Ray grinned. I like her. Mrs. Chen survived the Cultural Revolution, Sarah explained. She knows something about dealing with bullies. In China, they told us we were wrong for wanting old ways. Here, they tell you that you are wrong for being strong woman. Same stupidity, different language. Sarah finished Ray's haircut and brushed off his shoulders. $25. Keep the change, he said, handing her 40. And Sarah? Those Murphy's boys come back and give you trouble, you call me. Not because you can't handle them, but because harassment is illegal and I'm paid to do something about it. After Ray left, Sarah began preparing for Mrs. Chen's appointment. The older woman had specific preferences: wash, trim, and style, always done with gentle care for her thinning hair. You know, Mrs. Chen said as Sarah led her to the washing station, when I first come to America, people tell me many things about how to be a good immigrant. Smile always, be grateful, don't make waves, never complain. Did you follow their advice? For a while, yes. Then I realize, people who give this advice, they never had to start over with nothing. Easy to tell others to be grateful when you never lost everything. Sarah began washing the woman's hair, her movements gentle and methodical. What changed your mind? My grandson. He come home from school crying because other children say his lunch smell funny. Teacher tell him to bring normal food. I think about this. My grandmother's recipes, passed down through generations, now wrong, because American children don't understand. What did you do? I go to school next day with big pot of dumplings. I give to every child in class, tell them story about my grandmother and why food important. Teacher try to stop me, but children love dumplings. Now they ask for recipes. Sarah smiled. You made waves. Big waves, but good waves. Sometimes people need to see that different, not same as wrong. As Sarah trimmed Mrs. Chen's hair, the older woman continued. Those boys today, they see woman and think weak. They see small business and think desperate. They not see person who survive difficult things and build something good. How do you know about the boys? I see them leave. They look, how you say, like someone step on their balloon. Deflated. Yes, deflated. Is good thing. Sometimes young men need to learn world not arranged for their convenience. Sarah was putting the finishing touches on Mrs. Chen's style when the door chimed again. This time it was an older man she didn't recognize. Mid-50s, silver hair, expensive suit. He looked around the shop with the appraising eye of someone used to evaluating businesses. Are you Sarah Mackenzie? He asked. I am. Can I help you? My name is Michael Murphy. I own Murphy's Barbershop. Sarah's hands stilled. Mrs. Chen watched the exchange with interest. Mr. Murphy. I assume you're here about your employee's visit earlier. I am. He looked genuinely uncomfortable. I want to apologize. What they did was completely unacceptable. Sarah resumed working on Mrs. Chen's hair. What exactly did they tell you happened? Initially, they said they'd made a recruitment offer and you'd responded with hostility. But when I pressed for details, the story kept changing. And when Mrs. Patterson from the coffee shop called to tell me what they were saying about you around the neighborhood. He shook his head. I'm embarrassed by their behavior. Mrs. Patterson called you? She's been cutting hair longer than both of us combined. She knows good work when she sees it, and she told me exactly what she thought of my boy's attitude. Mrs. Chen spoke up. You fire them? Murphy looked at her in surprise. I beg your pardon? Your boys. You fire them for being rude to good businesswoman? They're suspended pending a formal review. Not enough, Mrs. Chen said firmly. They represent your business. When they act badly, they make your business look bad. In China, we say, one rotten apple spoils whole basket. Murphy appeared to be processing this critique from the elderly customer. Sarah finished Mrs. Chen's styling and removed the cape. There you go, Mrs. Chen. Beautiful as always. Thank you, dear. The older woman stood and faced Murphy directly. You want to make real apology? You come here as customer. You pay for good haircut and see what real service looks like. Then you go back and teach your boys how to respect people. With that, she handed Sarah $30 for a $25 service and walked out, leaving Murphy standing awkwardly in the middle of the shop. She's not wrong, Sarah said, beginning to clean her station again. About what? About seeing what real service looks like. When was the last time you sat in one of your own chairs? Actually experienced what your customers experience? Murphy frowned. I don't usually, I have a regular barber at an upscale place downtown. Of course you do. So you have no idea what the day-to-day operation of your business actually feels like from the customer's perspective. She gestured to her chair. Sit down. I'm sorry. Sit down. You came here to apologize, but apologies without understanding are just words. You want to know why your employees thought they could walk in here and disrespect me? Because they've learned that attitude from somewhere. Murphy hesitated, then slowly took a seat in the chair. Sarah draped a cape around his shoulders and began studying his hair. When did you open Murphy's? She asked, beginning to work. 12 years ago. Built it from nothing. 1 chair in a strip mall. And now, 8 chairs, 4 full-time employees, 2 part-time. We're the biggest barbershop in the neighborhood. Sarah nodded, sectioning his hair with practiced efficiency. Success can be intoxicating. It's easy to start believing that bigger automatically means better. You don't think it does? I think it means different. Bigger means you can serve more people, but it also means you're further removed from the actual service. When was the last time you personally cut someone's hair? Murphy was quiet for a moment. About 10 years ago. So your employees have been learning the business without you actively modeling the standards you expect. I have managers who learned from other employees, who learned from other employees. like a game of telephone but with professional standards. Sarah continued cutting, her movements precise and unhurried. Tell me about your hiring process. Standard stuff. Check their certification, maybe a practical demonstration, references if they have them. What about character, empathy, ability to connect with customers? Well, those are harder to quantify, but not harder to observe. Do you spend time with your employees during their interactions with customers? Do you know how they treat people? Murphy was beginning to look uncomfortable. I assume they're professional. We've never had complaints. Or maybe you've never heard the complaints. There's a difference. Sarah worked in silence for several minutes, letting Murphy process the conversation. Finally, he spoke. The boys said you served overseas. I did. What was that like? Sarah paused her cutting. Which part? The constant stress? The friends I lost? The way everything I thought I knew about myself got stripped away and rebuilt? Or the way people look at me now like I'm either a victim to be pitied or a ticking time bomb to be managed? I don't know. All of it, I guess. It was hard and educational. And it taught me that how you treat people when they can't do anything for you tells you everything about who you really are. She resumed cutting. Your boys came in here today and saw a woman running a small business. They assumed that made me desperate, inferior, in need of rescue. They didn't ask about my qualifications, my experience, or my goals. They just decided what I must be and treated me accordingly. And you think that reflects on my business practices? I think it reflects on the culture you've created, whether you meant to or not. When employees feel comfortable disrespecting potential competitors, it suggests they've learned that dismissive attitudes are acceptable. Murphy watched her work in the mirror. You're very good at this. I should be. I've been doing it for 22 years. 22 years, but you look young enough that your employees assumed I couldn't possibly know what I'm doing. She stepped back to examine her work. Here's the thing, Mr. Murphy. I'm not angry at your boys for being young and stupid. Young and stupid is fixable with time and proper guidance. I'm disappointed that they work for a business owner who apparently never taught them that respect and professionalism aren't just for customers who look like them. Sarah began the finishing touches, using a straight razor to clean up the edges. You want to know what I learned cutting hair in Syria? I learned that every person who sits in your chair is someone's son, daughter, parent, spouse. They all have stories, fears, hopes, dreams. Some of them have been through hell, and some of them are heading into it. But for the time they're in your chair, your job is to make them feel human and cared for. She removed the cape and brushed off his shoulders. That's $50. Murphy blinked. 50? But your sign says 25 for a basic cut. That's my veteran discount rate. You get the full civilian price. That seems excessive. Sarah smiled coldly. Supply and demand, Mr. Murphy. I'm the only barber in this neighborhood who cuts hair with 22 years of experience, including 3 years in combat zones. Premium service commands premium prices. Murphy reluctantly pulled out his wallet and handed her $50. This has been educational. I hope so, because here's what's going to happen next. Your boys are going to continue spreading their version of today's events around the neighborhood. They're going to paint me as an unstable veteran who threatened them with weapons and scared them with war stories. And some people will believe them, because it's easier to dismiss me as crazy than to confront the possibility that they might be wrong about women, veterans, or small business owners. She walked him to the door. But here's what they don't understand. I didn't survive 3 years in a war zone by being crazy or threatening. I survived by being competent, professional, and absolutely unwilling to let anyone treat me as less than I am. And I'm not going to start compromising on that now. Murphy paused at the door. What can I do to make this right? You can train your employees to treat all potential customers with respect, regardless of their assumptions about who deserves it. You can model the behavior you expect instead of delegating character development to kids who don't know any better. And you can remember that success means more than just being bigger than everyone else. After Murphy left, Sarah locked the door and flipped the sign to closed. It was only 3 p.m., but she needed time to process the day's events. She walked to the back room of her shop, where she kept a small office and break area. On the wall hung a photo from her time in Syria, herself with 4 other contractors at the barbershop they'd run on the base. 2 of the men in the photo were dead now, killed in the same IED attack that had destroyed their original shop. She'd never told anyone the full story of that day. How she'd been the only one not in the shop when the bomb went off because she'd been getting supplies from the storage room. How she'd dug through the rubble with her bare hands trying to find survivors. How she'd kept the barbershop running afterward, alone, because the soldiers needed somewhere to feel normal. The door chimed, and Sarah realized she'd forgotten to lock it. She walked back to the front and saw Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman who ran the coffee shop down the street. "I know you're closed, dear, but I wanted to check on you." "I'm fine, Mrs. Patterson. Just a long day. I heard about the Murphy's boys, and I called their boss to tell him exactly what I thought of their behavior." Sarah smiled. "That was you? 43 years cutting hair teaches you a few things about professional standards. Those boys needed to learn that their actions have consequences." Mrs. Patterson settled into one of the waiting chairs. "You know, when I first heard you were opening a shop in the neighborhood, some people had concerns." "What kind of concerns?" "The usual nonsense. You were young, you were a woman, you'd been overseas. People worried you might be unreliable." "And what did you tell them?" "I told them to mind their own business and let your work speak for itself. And it has. You're the best barber this neighborhood has seen in years." Sarah felt unexpectedly emotional. "Thank you. That means a lot. Those boys today, they represent everything that's wrong with the young generation. They think they know everything, but they've never had to prove themselves through real hardship. They're not all bad. Just poorly guided. You're more generous than I'd be. But then again, you've seen real problems. Puts things in perspective." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Finally, Mrs. Patterson spoke again. "What are you going to do about this situation?" "What do you mean?" "Well, they're going to keep talking, making you out to be the problem. You going to let that stand?" Sarah considered the question. "I've been thinking about that. Part of me wants to just ignore it and let my work speak for itself, but another part of me thinks that staying quiet just enables the behavior." "What would you have done in Syria?" "In Syria, if someone disrespected the shop or threatened our ability to serve the soldiers, we dealt with it directly. No games, no politics. Just clear consequences for unacceptable behavior." "Sounds like you have your answer." The next morning, Sarah arrived at her shop to find a line of customers waiting outside. Word had spread through the neighborhood about the confrontation with Murphy's employees, and people were coming to show their support. "Sarah," called out Janet Williams, a teacher from the local elementary school. "I've been meaning to try your shop for months. Today seemed like the perfect day." "Same here," said Tom Rodriguez, a firefighter she recognized from the neighborhood. "My regular barber retired last month anyway." As Sarah unlocked the door, she realized that the Murphy's boys' attempt to discredit her had backfired. Instead of driving customers away, their gossip had highlighted something many people had already suspected, that there were different standards being applied to different businesses in the neighborhood. The day was busy, with customers coming in throughout the morning and afternoon. Each one had heard some version of the previous day's events, and each one wanted to form their own opinion based on actual experience. Around 2 p.m., as Sarah was finishing up with a customer, Detective Martinez walked in. "Afternoon, Sarah. Got a minute?" "Always. What's on your mind?" "Well, I had an interesting conversation with Murphy this morning. He came by the station to file a complaint." Sarah's hands stilled. "A complaint about what?" "That's the interesting part. He started to say you'd threatened his employees, but when I asked for specifics, he couldn't provide any. Then he tried to say you'd charged him an unfair rate, but when I pointed out that pricing is at business owner discretion, he backed off that too." Martinez sat down in the waiting area. Eventually, he admitted that his real problem was that you'd made him look bad in front of his employees. Seems like the man's got a bruised ego. Is he going to be a problem? I don't think so. I explained to him that filing false complaints is a crime, and that harassment of local business owners wouldn't be tolerated. He seemed to get the message. What about his employees? That's trickier. They haven't done anything illegal, just unprofessional. But I've made it clear that any escalation will be taken seriously. Sarah nodded. I appreciate you looking out for me, Ray. But I don't want special treatment just because we're both veterans. It's not special treatment. It's community policing. When someone threatens the stability of local businesses, it affects everyone. Is that what this is? A threat to stability? Martinez considered the question. What do you think? You've got a successful small business, you employ local people, you contribute to the neighborhood. Some guys come in and try to undermine that based on nothing but their own assumptions. Yeah, I'd call that a threat to stability. That evening, as Sarah was closing up, she reflected on the past 2 days. She'd been tested in a way she hadn't expected, and she'd discovered that her community was more supportive than she'd realized. Her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. Sarah's touch. This is Sarah. Ms. Mackenzie? This is Colonel James Harrison. I understand you worked with our people overseas. Sarah straightened. Yes, sir. Who's calling, please? I'm with the VA regional office. We've been looking for qualified veterans to participate in a new program, providing services to returning soldiers who are having trouble readjusting to civilian life. What kind of services? Well, that's where you come in. We're finding that a lot of our guys respond better to civilian services provided by fellow veterans than to traditional clinical settings. Something about the informal environment makes them more comfortable opening up. Sarah was intrigued. You want me to cut hair for veterans? We want you to be part of a support network. The haircut is just the entry point. The real work is providing a safe space where these guys can talk about what they're going through without feeling judged or medicalized. How did you hear about me? Detective Martinez recommended you. Said you were exactly the kind of person we needed. Someone with overseas experience who understands both the military mindset and civilian business operations. Sarah looked around her shop, thinking about the events of the past few days. Colonel, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think this program would be taken seriously, or would it be seen as some kind of charity work for unemployable veterans? Colonel Harrison was quiet for a moment. Ms. Mackenzie, can I be frank with you? Please. There are people who will always see veterans as either heroes to be worshipped or victims to be managed. But there are also people who see us as what we really are, experienced professionals who've proven we can handle difficult situations with competence and integrity. And which group makes the decisions? That depends on us. If we keep proving our competence and refusing to accept lower standards, eventually the decision-makers have to acknowledge reality. Sarah smiled. When do we start? 6 months later, Sarah's shop had become an unofficial community center. 3 mornings a week, she provided services to veterans through the VA program. The rest of the time, she served her regular customers, many of whom had become friends as well as clients. Murphy's barbershop had lost 4 of its original employees. 2 quit after the incident with Sarah, embarrassed by their own behavior once they understood the full situation. 2 others were fired after additional complaints about their treatment of customers. Michael Murphy himself had become a regular customer at Sarah's Touch, coming in monthly for cuts and conversations about business ethics and employee development. He'd also started sending his new hires to Sarah for a professionalism evaluation before they began working with customers. You know, he said during one visit, I never realized how much damage those boys were doing to my reputation. It wasn't malicious, Sarah replied, working on his trim. They were just young and overconfident. Classic case of not knowing what they didn't know. Still, I should have caught it sooner. Maybe. Or maybe this was exactly when you needed to learn it. Timing isn't always in our control, but response always is. Mrs. Chen had become Sarah's unofficial business advisor, stopping by weekly to offer opinions on everything from customer service to inventory management. Her granddaughter had started working part-time at the shop, learning the business from the ground up. You know what I like about this place? Detective Martinez asked during one of his regular appointments. What's that? It's real. No pretense, no games, just good work and honest conversation. That's all I ever wanted to provide. Sometimes that's revolutionary, Sarah laughed. Revolutionary? I think you're being a little dramatic. Am I? Look around. You've got veterans getting support they need, kids learning work ethic from their elders, business owners learning about professional standards, and customers who know they'll be treated with respect regardless of who they are. That's not normal in America anymore. That's special. As Sarah swept up the day's hair, she thought about the long journey that had brought her to this moment. From a scared teenager learning to cut hair in her hometown, to a confident professional working in war zones, to a small business owner building community connections. The Murphy's boys had thought they were encountering someone weak and desperate. Instead, they'd found someone who'd been tested by circumstances they couldn't imagine and had emerged stronger, not bitter. The best part wasn't that she'd proven them wrong. The best part was that she'd helped create something better. A space where people could come together across differences and find common ground in the simple human need to be treated with dignity and respect. Outside, the Portland evening was settling into darkness. Sarah locked up her shop and headed home, satisfied with another day's work. Tomorrow would bring new customers, new challenges, new opportunities to prove that competence and character weren't limited by age, gender, or background. And if anyone else wanted to test that proposition, well, she'd be ready for them too.